nation that aspires to lead must first learn to govern itself. India's path to overtaking the traditional superpowers does not begin with weapons or wealth, but with the cultivation of internal order. Just as an individual begins transformation not by changing the world, but by first adjusting the position of their own spine, a nation must correct its posture from within before expecting others to follow its lead. This internal discipline, silent, sustained and self-driven, is the true force behind India's rise. India's strength lies in its ability to embrace structure without sacrificing its diversity. This is not a contradiction, it is a discipline. For centuries, India's spiritual traditions have trained the mind to remain still in the midst of chaos, to find unity within difference. Today, this spiritual training expresses itself not only in temples and meditation halls, but in classrooms, tech centers, and villages. The government's effort to bring digital infrastructure to the most remote regions is not just a technological achievement, it is a lesson in balance. Order brought into disorder creates alignment. That is what we see in India's internal transformation. Consider the value of breath in martial training. One who learns to control their breath does not only breathe, they command energy, focus, and movement. Likewise, India is learning to command its resources. Not just the natural ones, but human capital, innovation, and the power of youth. With over half of its population under the age of 30, the country stands not on the brink of potential, but in the middle of it. Yet without discipline, potential is chaotic. What India is doing, often quietly, is building systems of accountability, education, and skill development to turn energy into power. Education reform is a key example. Moving beyond rote memorization and into critical thinking, India is not only preparing students to take exams, but to solve problems. This shift from passive learning to active engagement mirrors the internal discipline of a martial artist who must move from repetition to realization. It's not the punch that matters, it's the understanding behind it. The ability to think, to adapt, and to remain stable in uncertain environments is becoming the foundation of India's new generation. These are not soft values, they are the very qualities needed to lead. The same applies to economic discipline. While external observers focus on GDP numbers or stock markets, India's most powerful moves are beneath the surface. Financial inclusion through programs like Jan Dhan Yojana, direct benefit transfers, and digital identity systems reflect a deep understanding. To be powerful is to ensure that every citizen is included in the structure of the nation. Inclusion is not a slogan, it is a form of internal alignment. When the inner organs of the body communicate properly, the body becomes strong. When the different parts of a nation are aligned through fairness, access, and opportunity, the nation becomes unshakable. Discipline is not merely austerity, it is clarity. Clarity of purpose, clarity of values, and clarity of movement. A multipolar world does not stem from a desire to resist others, but from an awareness of its own rhythm. Instead of reacting to every global shift, it is maintaining course through deliberate decisions. Whether in foreign relations, trade policy, or defense strategy, the same principle applies. Never allow external noise to disrupt internal focus. Like a monk who continues to walk while others argue, India is stepping forward with poise. Another reflection of internal discipline is seen in India's approach to self-reliance. Programs like Atmanirbhar Bharat are not isolationist. They are exercises in sovereignty. When a practitioner trains alone, they do not reject community. They prepare to serve it from a place of strength. In the same way, India's push to manufacture its own goods, design its own technology, and produce its own energy is not to cut off from the world, but to meet the world from a centered position. Independence is not separation, it is integrity. Corruption, inefficiency, and political instability are challenges that have long plagued many rising nations. India is addressing these not with short-term displays, but through deep institutional reform. From simplifying tax systems to streamlining governance, it is choosing not the easy path of superficial change, but the disciplined path of systemic transformation. This is not flashy, it is difficult. But just like in martial training, the deepest transformations happen in silence, repetition, and effort away from the spotlight. Discipline is also seen in India's cultural confidence. Unlike nations that abandon their roots in pursuit of modernity, India is learning to carry both. Its cinema, literature, philosophy, and music are not confined to nostalgia. They are evolving, being shared, and even exported. Culture is not decoration, it is the spirit of a people. When that spirit is stable, when it can move through time without forgetting itself, then a nation becomes not just powerful, but meaningful. This meaning gives rise to respect, and from respect comes influence. Leadership begins with self-leadership. When a young leader wakes up early, trains the body, cultivates the mind, and moves through the day with intention, they become an example others naturally follow. India, by waking itself up through reforms, clarity, and inclusion, is becoming such an example. Not by imitating other powers, but by finding its own cadence. This rhythm, built on inner discipline, cannot be stopped by external judgment. It does not seek approval, it seeks only alignment between purpose and action. In conclusion, India's journey toward becoming a superpower is not defined by conquest or competition. It is defined by a disciplined return to itself. Through internal order, educational reform, economic clarity, and cultural self-respect, it is mastering the only domain that truly matters before all others. The self, as this mastery deepens, the rest of the world will simply adjust to the reality of its presence. The sun does not ask to be seen. It rises and the world must witness it. Unlike the urgency seen in much of the Western world, India's path forward is shaped not by speed but by rhythm. In martial training, one learns early that attacking too quickly opens one to defeat. A skilled fighter waits, not because he is afraid, but because he understands the nature of timing. The breath before the strike is often more important than the strike itself. Similarly, India's strategy is not built on racing toward dominance. It is built on deliberate observation, slow but certain movements, and the wisdom to act only when the moment is right. This is not hesitation, it is discipline in motion. In global affairs, timing is everything. A superpower that rises too fast may burn out before it stabilizes. The most enduring empires were not built in a rush. They were forged through decades of preparation, layers of alliances, and the quiet study of the world around them. India too is positioning itself with this long view. Its foreign policy does not scream for attention, it whispers with purpose. Rather than aligning with one bloc or another, India maintains strategic autonomy. It nurtures partnerships across continents, participates in global dialogues, and responds to crises with measured calm. This is not a lack of engagement, it is engagement with awareness. Strategic patience is not passive, it is deeply active, requiring more control than aggression. Resisting the urge to retaliate, to dominate, or to boast is a higher discipline than yielding to it. When India chooses neutrality or restraint in a volatile moment, it is not because it lacks strength, it is because it understands strength is not always visible. Power expressed in silence often creates more movement than power expressed in noise. In many ways, this mirrors the philosophy of stillness in action. The archer waits. The hunter observes. The monk breathes, and then, only then do they act. In the realm of defense, India exemplifies this principle clearly. It invests in its military strength, not with the loud declarations of war readiness, but with consistent preparation. Modernizing its defense systems, expanding its cyber capabilities, and developing indigenous technology reflect not a rush to conflict, but a commitment to sovereignty. India does not provoke, but it prepares. This preparation is quiet, steady, and relentless. The purpose is not to show power, but to ensure that when the time comes, power is already in place. Economic policy is another field where strategic patience is vital. Rapid growth without deep roots is a castle built on sand. India is learning from the mistakes of others, not overextending credit, not opening every sector too quickly, and not surrendering strategic industries to foreign control. Instead, it is building layer by layer. Infrastructure projects that may take years are being pursued not for political wins, but for long-term gain. Investment in railways, energy grids, and rural connectivity is slow but steady. The fruit of this labor is not immediate, but the tree will stand tall when the roots are deep. Diplomatically, India's engagement in forums like the BRICS, G20, and the Quad reflects an understanding of how to be present without being possessive. Rather than attempting to control narratives, it listens, absorbs, and contributes when it has something of value. This ability to remain at the table without demanding the spotlight is a form of mature leadership. It creates influence not through domination, but through consistency. Over time, partners and even rivals recognize reliability as strength. India is not unpredictable, it is aware. That awareness is the essence of patience. On the technological front, India's emergence is not flashy but formidable. Its space missions, while cost-effective, achieve results once considered impossible. Its digital infrastructure, while modest in presentation, serves over 1 billion people. Its software industry, while quiet, powers systems across the globe. These are not accidents. They are the outcomes of decades of calculated investment, education, and resilience. The world is beginning to see the power of such patience. When a nation refuses shortcuts, it earns long-term stability. Culturally, India's influence spreads not by force but by exposure. Its music, films, philosophy, and food are not aggressively marketed. They are simply made available, and people come. Not because they are pushed, but because the value is real. Strategic patience in culture means creating, sustaining, and sharing without expecting immediate return. The recognition comes later. This form of soft power, subtle and non-confrontational, is shaping perceptions around the world. It builds bridges that political agreements often cannot. The principle also applies to India's domestic politics. Fast decisions often ignore the minority. Deliberate ones consider it. The ability to move slowly while carrying everyone forward is a rare skill. India is learning it every day. This is how lasting nations are formed, not through speed but through balance. At the heart of all this lies a mindset. The world does not need to be conquered. It needs to be understood. In the past, great powers rose by trying to dominate others. In the future, power will come to those who understand when to speak, when to listen, and when to act. India is practicing this every day. It does not need to mirror other superpowers. It needs to remain aligned with its own rhythm. That rhythm, steady and firm, is the foundation of true transformation. The greatest warriors are those who do not draw their sword unless there is no other way. The most respected leaders are those who lead not through command, but through presence. India, by choosing timing over noise, awareness over reaction, and preparation over panic, is walking that path. It is not ignoring the world, it is watching it. And when the moment arrives, it will be ready not just to participate, but to lead. This is the essence of strategic patience, not waiting passively, but preparing actively in silence. Just as the seed waits in darkness before breaking the soil, India is rooted deeply in observation, learning, and refinement. The sun does not rise faster when we demand it to. It rises when it is time, and when it does, the entire sky changes. It is easy to manufacture machines, but difficult to create meaning. The rise of a superpower cannot be measured only in steel, circuits, and statistics. True strength lies in the ability to harmonize progress with purpose, technology with wisdom, and speed with sensitivity. India's path forward is not just to become technologically advanced, but to remain spiritually rooted. The balance between the sword and the spirit is not a metaphor, it is a necessity. A nation that becomes powerful without grounding in its identity may collapse under its own weight. But a nation that builds from within, using both ancient insight and modern tools, creates a power that is not only great but sustainable. India has long been a land of paradoxes, where ancient chants echo beside data centers, where the scent of incense blends with the sterile glow of microchips. Rather than rejecting this duality, India embraces it. The same mind that meditates in the morning may write code by night. This is not confusion. This is harmony. The sharpness of technology and the softness of culture do not contradict each other, they complete each other. India's Masterplan is not about becoming a nation of machines. It is about becoming a nation of awakened minds using machines wisely. Innovation without wisdom leads to arrogance. Wisdom without innovation leads to stagnation. India is walking the line between both. It is advancing in fields like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and quantum computing, but with a backdrop of philosophical thought that reminds its people to ask, what is the purpose of our inventions? Why are we building what we are building? When a country asks such questions, it avoids the trap of shallow progress. It remembers that technology must serve humanity, not the other way around. When education, this balance is being nurtured quietly. Young minds are being trained not only in science and mathematics, but also in ethics, mindfulness, and holistic thinking. More institutions are combining technical education with traditional disciplines like yoga, Sanskrit, and environmental ethics. The goal is not to produce only engineers or analysts. It is to produce thinkers who can lead, decide, and reflect. When young people grow up with both the sword and the spirit, they become powerful, not just in what they can do, but in who they choose to be. Culturally, India is not replacing its traditions to make room for modernity. It is interweaving them. The popularity of Ayurveda alongside advanced medical research, or the rise of spiritual tourism alongside industrial development, shows a country that refuses to forget its soul while strengthening its body. Even in its cities, where concrete replaces forest, there is a conscious return to green spaces, to wellness centers, and to rituals that reconnect people to something deeper than daily survival. In this, there is a message. Progress that does not preserve the spirit will ultimately fail. India's plan is to evolve without erasing itself. Technological dominance often brings with it a loss of values. Nations begin to measure success only by wealth or weaponry. But India's rise introduces a different measure, inner clarity. A superpower must not only export products, it must export peace. It must become a source not just of goods, but of ideas. India, through its emphasis on spirituality, meditation, and philosophical dialogue, is influencing the world in subtle but profound ways. Millions now turn to Indian practices not because of economic pressure, but because of their intrinsic value. This kind of influence cannot be bought, it is earned. Digital growth in India, while rapid, is also being used to foster unity. Programs that connect rural farmers with markets, that give school children access to online education, and that offer telemedicine to those without hospitals. These are not just data points, they are examples of how technology, when guided by compassion, becomes a bridge. It does not isolate people in cold efficiency, it connects them through meaningful service. The nation's massive digital ID system, while technological in nature, also reflects a desire for inclusion, for bringing every citizen into the fold, not just those who live in cities or speak English. This balance is also reflected in India's growing space program. Missions to the Moon and Mars are not just demonstrations of capability, they are statements of intention. While others compete to dominate outer space, India's tone is different. It explores not to conquer, but to understand. The humility behind such exploration is rarely seen in global discourse, yet it carries a deep lesson. A powerful nation does not have to shout. It can act quietly with reverence and still inspire awe. Space, like the soul, is vast. Only those who approach it with respect will truly benefit from its gifts. The harmony between tradition and innovation is visible even in India's entrepreneurship. Startups are building apps for ancient practices, digitizing sacred texts, and using AI to preserve endangered languages. This is not regression. It is evolution with memory. A culture that remembers its past while building its future is one that cannot be easily destabilized. It is not swayed by every trend or provocation. It knows who it is, and that knowledge becomes its compass. This fusion of technology and culture is also a protection against moral erosion. As the world becomes faster and more connected, the temptation to act without thinking grows. But India's cultural framework teaches patience, introspection, and self-restraint. It reminds its people that not every opportunity is worth taking, not every advancement is worth the cost. When power is held without clarity, it becomes dangerous. But when clarity guides power, it becomes transformative. India is not trying to recreate the blueprint of past superpowers. It is drawing a new one where satellites and sacred chants coexist, one where coding and compassion meet, one where innovation is not an escape from humanity but a deeper embrace of it. This is the future the world needs, a future where development does not disconnect people from their roots, where strength is measured not only in speed but in stillness. In this journey, mistakes will be made, there will be friction, but the direction is clear. India is becoming a place where the sword and the spirit do not compete. They cooperate. It does not seek to overpower others with its sharpness. It seeks to illuminate the path with its wisdom. In doing so, it shows that the true mark of a superpower is not how much it can dominate, but how deeply it can harmonize. And when that harmony becomes visible to the world, leadership will follow naturally. Not because it is claimed, but because it is deserved. To truly lead the world, a nation must do more than just rise above others. It must elevate others as it ascends. Power that uplifts is remembered, while power that suppresses is eventually rejected. India's superpower ambition is not rooted in dominance, but in contribution. This contribution comes not from charity or grand gestures, but from a deeply held value. The world is one family. This ancient idea, echoed in its philosophies and lived in its diverse culture, is now shaping its modern global approach. In this, India is not simply participating in the world order, it is redefining it. In a time when countries turn inward, guarding borders and building walls, India opens dialogues. Its diplomacy is guided not by conquest, but by connection. It engages with nations across continents not to gain territory, but to create trust. Its growing leadership in the global south is one of shared struggle and shared growth. When India speaks at international forums, it carries not just its own voice, but the aspirations of many who have long been unheard. This role as a bridge between the developed and the developing, between the East and the West, is not a strategy, it is an inheritance now made intentional. When a tree grows tall, its shadow must offer shelter. India's foreign aid to smaller nations, its medical diplomacy during the pandemic, and its technology sharing agreements are not acts of charity, they are reflections of responsibility. True power does not hoard, it shares. But sharing requires strength. One cannot give what one does not have. And so India's rise is built on first strengthening itself and then using that strength to support others. This is not weakness. It is a higher form of leadership, one that does not fear the success of others but encourages it. In the realm of trade, India is advocating for fairness, not just access. Its voice in the World Trade Organization and similar bodies reflects a shift. From silent participant to principled negotiator, it is no longer willing to accept systems that benefit a few at the cost of many. But rather than breaking the table, India is bringing a new table, one where cooperation is built on mutual respect, not historical privilege. This kind of economic leadership is slow, sometimes frustrating, but it is real. It does not seek to replace one imbalance with another. It seeks to balance the scales with calm determination. India's environmental stance also reflects this evolving leadership. As a developing country, it could claim exemption from responsibility, but instead it chooses stewardship. Its commitments to renewable energy, its leadership in the International Solar Alliance, and its increasing investment in sustainable infrastructure are not just national goals, they are global offerings. When a nation chooses to protect what it can easily exploit, it becomes a custodian, not just a user, of the earth. This custodianship is rare, and it builds credibility that no amount of military or economic might can buy. At the heart of India's contribution is its cultural and intellectual wealth. The world is not only thirsty for goods, it is thirsty for meaning. In a time of disconnection, anxiety, and fragmentation, India's ancient systems of thought offer not just inspiration but integration. Yoga, mindfulness, nonviolence, and holistic healing are not commodities, they are gifts, offered without force, adopted freely. They have begun to reshape lives across the globe. And in this soft influence lies a power greater than any political alliance, the ability to touch the spirit of humanity. No empire built on fear has ever achieved that. India's growing presence in global institutions is another form of contribution. It is not satisfied with being a member. It seeks to reform these bodies so they reflect today's realities, not yesterday's hierarchies. Its demand for a permanent seat at the UN Security Council is not just about prestige, it is about representation. It is about giving voice to over 1 billion people who have for too long been spoken about but not spoken to. This insistence is not arrogance, it is alignment. A world order that includes India as a decision maker is one that begins to mirror the diversity and complexity of the world itself. Technology, when used correctly, becomes a tool of unity. India's export of digital platforms, its experience with Aadhaar, digital payments, and scalable tech for governance is now being shared with other nations. These are not just transactions, they are transmissions of possibility. When a country says, "Here is what worked for us, maybe it can help you too," it becomes a partner, not a competitor. This spirit of partnership, of working with rather than ahead of others, is deeply embedded in India's approach. Even in times of conflict, India chooses mediation over escalation. Its stance on global wars and disputes is rarely reactionary. It waits, it listens, it invites both sides to the table. This patience, often misunderstood, is actually its strength. In a world addicted to instant response, India offers reflection. And in times of chaos, the voice that remains steady is the one others begin to follow. Influence is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply the presence of someone who does not panic when others do. India's diaspora plays a quiet but powerful role in this vision. Spread across the world, yet connected by values, the Indian community is not only an economic force, it is a cultural ambassador. Doctors, engineers, artists, entrepreneurs, they do not just succeed, they carry with them a way of thinking, a way of being, one that blends excellence with humility, ambition with service. This global presence is not orchestrated, it is organic. And it reinforces India's image not as a rising threat, but as a rising hope. The final measure of a superpower is not what it takes from the world, but what it gives back. India's growing contributions in technology, diplomacy, culture, philosophy, and peace are not accidental. They are deliberate steps in a journey that honors both its past and its potential. As it continues to rise, its role will not be to lead with dominance, but with dignity. Not to rule over, but to walk with. Not to demand attention, but to offer value. In this offering lies the deepest form of power, the ability to inspire, to remind humanity that greatness is not about control, but contribution, that strength is not in isolation, but in elevation, and that leadership in its highest form is a service. India is not trying to become the next superpower in the mold of those before it. It is becoming something else entirely, a superpower of balance, of insight, and of shared destiny. And that kind of power, once it is fully realized, cannot be challenged. It can only be welcomed.